So yes, thank you all for coming. This week we have Wendy Hassler-Forest from Musicians Without Borders, who is going to talk about the Musicians Without Borders projects in North Macedonia and I think specifically, or in particular, Mitrovica in Kosovo. We will have a presentation from Wendy about their work, and then there will be some time for questions afterwards.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for inviting me to do this today. I'm talking about how a music project was able to connect young people from the ethnically divided town of Mitrovica in Kosovo, as Luke mentioned. But first, I'd like to say a little bit about Musicians Without Borders, because we work in more places. We actually began during the Kosovo War, which was the last of the Balkan Wars, as many of you will know. And MWB was started as a group of musicians based in the Netherlands who knew how to organize and had experienced the power of music to connect people. This group was frustrated with the lack of international response during the nonviolent protests that had been ongoing in Kosovo, and the fact that the international community only really became engaged when the conflict became violent. They understood the importance of culture to the social fabric and imagined how music might contribute to reconciliation and rebuilding civil society. We reached out to musicians in Kosovo, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and North Macedonia, and began with exchanges, concerts, and tours, and everywhere, of course, making music, mostly with children and youth. More than 20 years later, we have long-term projects in the Balkans, the Middle East, Central Eastern Africa, Central America, and with refugees in Europe. And we've become a hub of a global network that applies the power of music to peace building and positive social change. I'd like to share just a short video that kind of gives you a feeling for all the diversity of the projects that we have.
One, two, three, four.
Music is powerful. It can influence behavior, shape culture, and strengthen social bonds. With 2 billion people living in fragile, conflict-affected states, Musicians Without Borders uses music to address the needs of divided societies.
My name is Sophie. I'm a Palestinian, and that's my trophy. I have my own rights.
Music can help heal the wounds of war and rediscover connections. The voices of the unheard are raised with music. And it's music that's the collective voice for social justice and peace building. Musicians Without Borders is a global network, engaging with artists, changemakers, and communities spread worldwide. We share expertise with our diverse programs in some of the world's most vulnerable communities. And we work closely with local musicians and organizations in response to local needs. So Musicians Without Borders impacts thousands of young men and women and older people every day, all through music. Music is a stepping stone towards lasting social change. Musicians Without Borders will continue to use music as a tool to build connections, foster empathy, and transform communities. Today and every day, join us in opposing war and stand with us for peace through music. Musicians Without Borders. War divides, music connects.
No one has the right to hurt me.
But the project that I've been focusing on for the past 13 years almost is the Mitrovica Rock School. Many of you know all this, but for those in the room who don't, this is a map of Kosovo and Serbia. And when it was all Yugoslavia, Kosovo was an autonomous province of the Yugoslav Republic of Serbia. It was autonomous because Kosovo has a large Albanian majority, which had successfully sought language rights and a level of political administration. And during the rise in nationalism in the 1990s, this autonomy was revoked, which ultimately led to the Kosovo War. You see in the orange, northern Kosovo, and right there on the dividing line is the city of Mitrovica. So the ethnic divisions that were left by the war, they continue to this day, and they run straight through the city of Mitrovica, with Serbs living north of the river and Albanians in the south. And when we started in 2008, it was the year that Kosovo had just unilaterally declared independence from Serbia, and the situation was very tense. For several years, we had hoped to work from a single building, which was right next to the main bridge. You see it in that picture, that yellow building is the cultural center. But that would have meant that young people would still have to cross the bridge to go to their lessons, and that just wasn't realistic or safe. So we opened 2 branches, one on either side of the town. And instead we brought people together outside Kosovo and started with a summer school. The first time we rode to Skopje, which is the capital of North Macedonia and very close to Mitrovica, it was for our very first summer school. And the kids from the north, they sat in the back of the bus, and the kids from the south sat in the front. Most of them had never been to the other side of their own town, and most of them didn't know anybody from the other community. For the first several years, all interethnic activities had to be held outside Kosovo. But at some point, we had too many ethnically mixed bands, and we literally couldn't afford to keep traveling abroad so that they could practice and perform together. So at that point, we started bringing people together in Mitrovica. And at first, this was in secret, which you can imagine is a kind of strange dynamic, because music making is a public thing that you want to share. So coming together to rehearse or perform for yourselves, for your friends, without cameras, without an audience. It's a very strange kind of situation, but it was the only way that we could do it safely in the beginning. But gradually we could be more open about this. I think as the communities kind of got used to the rock school situation, relaxed a little bit also, and everybody felt a little bit braver and a little safer to come together in town. I want to show you now a short video that was done by the BBC some years ago, which kind of shows this in-between period where people were coming together in Mitrovica, but still in secret.
Sometimes when I can't sleep, I try to remind myself why I want to keep fighting. I always wanted to sing, have that emotion in live music, you know. Sometimes it's all just too much, but we have something special that nobody can tell. We from the north and the students from the South Rock School, we met each other at Skopje because here is impossible to play together. And when we went to Skopje, they put us together in a band, and we just started to make music. We became close, there's nowhere to run. We can succeed, we can do this if we work as one. It's always great to meet new friends that have same interests as you do. And you learn from them, you have new experiences, and you work with different people. And it was just like meeting any other person from other culture, it doesn't matter to me.
If it's not a big deal for me, I don't think that it will be a big deal for the others. And I really don't care what the other think. I think art and politics are so far.
Yeah, it doesn't go together at all. If we get too much attention from people, for example, if they come to my side, it would be perhaps a problem, because there are always those people, they want to fight, they call themselves patriots, they don't like any other culture but their own and stuff. So that's why, if too many people know about it, maybe it would be a problem. So we keep it, so to say, more simple.
I would like to go freely and meet Yelena, make music together, write rehearsals together, everything about music, and everything that to stay in connection, because she's not only a good musician. Yeah, musician, but she's a great friend, and I'm so happy that I met her.
We are the ones left to go. We are the ones left to go. We are.
Yeah. So every year since then, we've been able to take a little step further, up to the point where now recently, until the lockdown, we were able to organize public concerts of mixed bands on both sides of Mitrovica. And teachers and students are crossing the bridge, sometimes by car, but sometimes even on foot, to have workshops and rehearsals together. There have been a lot of inter-ethnic projects in Kosovo since the war ended, but mostly they have little impact, and mostly the divide just persists. We do see some results at the Rock School that kind of go beyond what we see in most of these projects. So I just want to talk a little bit about why we think that is. There is this kind of like music is the universal language, and there is a bit to it about, the music does something, but we don't think that it's music making in itself per se that can have this impact. Music, in fact, played quite a destructive role. Also during the 1990s, there was the rise of turbo folk. Yeah, it's not all positive, the music story of former Yugoslavia. We think it's the combination of the genre and the process, and yes, then also in that context, the act of making music together. The genre that we chose it because Yugoslavia had a very strong pop, rock, and punk tradition, which was shared by all communities. And also Mitrovica, in that part of ex-Yugoslavia, was a known center for rock music. So they had like festivals and jam sessions and lots of bands. So there was a strong local culture that everybody referred to. But still, even if everything is pop and rock, we also noticed that some activities are more effective than others. The process of forming ethnically mixed bands who write their own original music has been central to the project's success. And this process is coached by a band coach who ensures that there is space for open and safe communication between the band members. We've been working with Rock Academy in the Netherlands for kind of the didactic context that we use in Mitrovica. They use it purely for didactic reasons, but because it goes from this kind of basis of equality and cooperation and creativity, it works very well with the goals that we're trying to achieve. I should also add that every time we took these little steps in Mitrovica, it was scary for us because often nobody else was doing it. So we didn't know how safe or unsafe it was to have a concert or to cross the bridge or to post a video or a photo online. And we didn't know how people would react to that. A lot of the concern is also for the kids, how will their own communities react? And we don't want to put them at any risk, of course. So it's always been like little baby steps and then evaluating and then the next little step. When we started the mixed band concerts in Kosovo, at first we only invited friends and family and we had lots of security. And then after a few times, we were a little less scared. And then after several years, our most recent concerts were in North Mitrovica and without any security at all, because at that point, it just felt okay to do it. The same goes for socializing between the students. The first time that we saw kids crossing the bridge from south to the north to go and visit their friends, we called their parents because we were concerned for their safety. So they were finally doing the thing that we supposedly hoped they would do, but we panicked and we were concerned that it was incredibly unsafe to do that at that time. But now it's also that it's become relatively normal. We see kids on the other side, also just because they have a reason to go, because they now know people on the other side. 2 years ago, in 2018, we were able to roll out this approach for the regional project Music Connects. This is a partnership with 2 other rock music schools in North Macedonia. Music School Enterprise follows the model of Mitrovica Rock School and connects ethnically Macedonian and Albanian youth, also through mixed bands and lessons. And Roma Rock School works multi-ethnically, and they merge traditional Roma melodies with alternative rock, and their goal is to integrate Roma youth in Macedonian society. Going into 2021, with Roma Rock School as a model, Mitrovica Rock School is now developing a program to also include Kosovo's Roma community, which continues to be the region's most discriminated and marginalized minority. Yeah, we have a film coming out next month. A film team has been making a documentary about Music Connects. I'd be happy to share an invite with all of you once I have it. I don't have it yet. Yeah, we have a bunch of micro trailers, we call them, for the documentary. So I wanted to show you one. It's just a minute, but it'll just give you a little taste.
Music is like a different language that everyone can join in on.
One day I told my mom, like, I want to play the drums, and here we are today.
We have a few new students.
This time we have 4 new bands, and they're very young.
They're really eager to learn.
It's kind of far away, and then I lose myself.
We give them tips like sing it to each other, and then it's more like a conversation.
Now I understand what takes so long to release a song.
You can hear the sound.
I got to know about a lot of stuff that I had no clue about.
Mitrovica is a divided city, but we're meeting completely new people that live right across the river, and that's crazy.
We all people, so we all good.
Each generation gets more progressive.
It spreads the story.
It opened my mind.
So yeah, not to ignore just this crazy year that we've had, because all these videos now look a little bit strange with all these people standing close to each other and so on. So I think this story is similar for a lot of different organizations that rely on, on people coming together. We've come across some of the same obstacles, I think, that we also hear coming back from other organizations in similar fields. For instance, how in the beginning of the first lockdown, participants embraced the online learning process, but that over time, they lost their motivation a little bit for that. And yeah, we've just had to find new ways to engage people and to connect. And we continue to learn. We're still kind of evolving in this situation also because the situation itself keeps evolving. But there are a couple of things that I think we can already take away from this year and into the next. One thing that really came through this year was that the strength of the local project structures was really crucial. So the close cooperation and years of capacity building that we invested in building up this school and the trust, because suddenly everything had to be remote, that was just vital in being able to continue during this period. Which again in itself for us affirmed how important it is to have a longer term approach and like an actual presence and not just like a short interim projects, because suddenly if that's your strategy, then suddenly it just falls apart under these circumstances. Also, as the need arose during the first lockdown, we started investing in bridging the connectivity gap that many of our participants experience. This sometimes meant just buying internet vouchers for kids. In some cases, we were able to actually invest in devices for them, which helped them not only stay engaged in the music program, but it also helped them just stay ahead in their own schools. All three participating schools adopted flexible and hybrid working forms, responding to what was possible during lockdown, and then again what was possible when it was again relative opening up. And when everything did have to be online, it was turned out to be really important for participants to have an active role. So the parts where there was like a passive learning role were harder to maintain. So we started coming up with online tutorials that were then linked to assignments that are linked to, for instance, songwriting or recording, or where you're actually creating something together to kind of reduce the feeling of being just a passive participant in a project. And in general, we found that the more local the activities, the more sustainable they were. Just very unfortunate for a project that works both internationally and regionally, but on the other hand, it did open our eyes to like other things that we could be doing. And one of the reasons that the Mitrovica Rock School has shifted its focus to Mitrovica's own Roma community was that broadening a regional or international partnership was just not an option. But I think this is a good thing that came out of a bad situation, because Mitrovica's Roma community is incredibly isolated and underserved. Plus we have the model of the Roma Rock School, so it actually kind of falls together really nicely at this time. Yeah, that is my story. I want to thank you for inviting me, and I'm here if anybody has any questions or comments.
Thank you very much, Wendy, for the presentation and talking about the work of the Mitrovica School, the Mitrovica Rock School, and Musicians Without Borders. If anyone has any questions, you can either post them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask. We have time for questions if there are any, so please go ahead.
I was going to ask, where do you think that you will go next in the world? Where, although I don't know if you would know that yet because of the COVID situation, but I think it's quite interesting where you think you could take the NGO.
Well, we've mostly responded to requests that came. So we haven't very often just gone somewhere and initiated something. So at this moment, and these requests often are related to kind of where we are already working. So it's like kind of regional expansion. The same way that Mitrovica Rock School then expanded with these schools in North Macedonia. So we've been asked, based on our work in El Salvador, we've been asked to start a project in Mexico. So that's kind of now in research pilot stage. And based on our work in Palestine, we're starting a pilot now in Jordan. And these are very different projects. One is like more with classical music students, that's in Jordan. The one in Mexico is more community music based. So they're very different kind of music genres, which is again also linked to the need, the request there.
Thank you. Any other questions right now? If not, I have a question very quickly. I was wondering, in the video, well, you mentioned in your presentation about how in the early days in Mitrovica it was all sort of kept secret or more secretive, and then in the video one of the girls who was speaking said a similar thing, that it's a bit more open, but it's, I think she said it was simpler if it was fewer people knew about it. What was the situation, say up until COVID hit? Before that, what sort of level of openness? Was it very open, or was it just it would go between schools?
It's pretty open. We can now we can like record music videos for ethnically mixed bands and post them on social media. Photos, we don't tag people, but also because a lot of them are minors, and safeguarding concerns, and also it should be their choice how public they are. But we do post things with consent, of course, and yeah, and like I said, we've had public concerts. We would not like boost on, we wouldn't advertise on social media if something is ethnically mixed. Because if it goes organically, then we think it's going to be friends of people who are kind of on board. And if we boost it, then we just reach strangers, and that would kind of increase the risk level. But we kind of see like, we ourselves sometimes wonder why. Like, why does this generation feel it's safe? Because the difference between this generation and last generation is just like last year. So often we have like new cycles of students every year, and every new cycle is like more comfortable doing something that the previous one wasn't. So why is this? And we think it's because the year before paved the way. So they saw that the others did that, nothing bad happened. So that's now kind of the new normal. That's what we can do now. So the next step doesn't feel so far. So I think that's how it has worked, that we just do more and more over time. Plus sometimes we've had like just a stroke of kind of external luck, or something that happened that kind of made it suddenly possible to do more. So we had one student who was like, her mom was Albanian and her dad was Bosniak, and she was bilingual, and she was in a mixed band, and then she's from the south, but then she moved to the north. So she had friends on both sides, so she started inviting people over. So suddenly people started hanging out together. And that was just like because one person happened to have this background and take the initiative. And so, and also sometimes externally, like the political situation would mean that people from the north needed Kosovo ID cards. So everybody was crossing the bridge during the month. So then we also started crossing the bridge more, and then that kind of kept going afterwards. So it's just kind of like feeling your way.
That's very pleasing. Are there any further questions from anyone else, perhaps?
I would like to ask something, because as I'm from Bosnia and Herzegovina, and we have something similar in some cities with this kind of divisions, and sometimes the problems come from the parents or from the elderly people that made these boundaries between young people. So did you face any issues with parents from children who wanted to play, for example, in the band but were not allowed, and similar things?
Yeah, especially in earlier years. So because we have two branches, sometimes kids just sign up for music lessons on their own side and aren't really, and their parents aren't aware of kind of that they might cooperate with the other side initially, or they just only support that bit of it. So it's fine if you stay in your own side. And then if they wanted to attend a summer school, because that was always a big thing, you get to go with, you know, a big group of your friends to Skopje for a week and stay in a hotel and, you know, and have a concert. It's really fun. So a lot of kids wanted to do that. And then we would get opposition sometimes, because not only would that mean a big interethnic group and a mixed group of leaders, but it would also mean for students from the north traveling through Kosovo. So there were, you know, it was just a combination of safety, various levels of safety concerns, like are they emotionally safe in that group and will they be looked after, but also is it safe to travel? And that, yeah, usually that could be resolved by talking. And these days it's everything is easier in that respect. We haven't had that situation so much. Yeah, again, I'm not actually sure why that is. I think maybe also just we've been doing it for almost 13 years. So I think people just got used to us. Like they just know that this is what we do and it goes okay. And so I guess it's fine. And there's another dimension. Mitrovica is not an easy place to raise children. It's very poor. There's nothing to do. There are gangs, there's organized crime. So I think also a lot of parents are just happy that their kids have this kind of wholesome hobby where they're supervised and they spend a lot of time at the school. Kids also spend a lot of time at the school when they don't have lessons because there's a place to hang out. And so I think it also just, you know, that is in a way the payback that the parents see, I think.
Thank you. Any other questions at this point? You've got a bit more time. If not, we can probably start to wind up, but it would be good if anyone has any further questions while we've got time for them. You can just unmute yourself if you have. No? Okay. In that case, I think we can start to wrap up. Is that someone? No? Thank you everyone for coming along to this digital talk. This is the last one before the new year and we'll be back in the new year. And thank you in particular to Wendy for coming. It's been really interesting to hear about your work. We've also got a comment too. So I think people appreciating the topic and the talk. This will be uploaded onto our YouTube channel, so you can share it with people afterwards, anyone who is interested to. But yes, thank you everyone for coming. I hope it was a worthwhile experience for you all. It was certainly great for me. Thank you again, Wendy. And I hope everyone has a great rest of the evening, a great rest of the week. And please do keep in touch with us on our Facebook and YouTube, etc. everyone, so that you can keep an eye on what's upcoming, and of course to have a look at Musicians Without Borders on their social media as well.